How's it going, everybody? And thank you for joining me in my library for this week's episode of ScatterBrain Saturday on Out of the Bothros. Nah, just kidding. We're actually just in front of my green screen in my kitchen. But I do want to discuss a little bit about the importance of a well-rounded education, actually. I kind of probably through most of high school, I mean, right around the time most people do, started kind of slacking off and pay attention to the wrong things in life. Just more inclined to having fun and doing things that were not really too restrictive, and just kind of enjoying myself and not paying attention to some of the things that would have benefited me later on down the road or even during that time. So I began to kind of not pay attention, and my grades started to slip. I ended up actually dropping out of school. Got my GED before I was supposed to graduate, but I did end up going that route instead of just getting my high school diploma. And you kind of tend to go back and think about some of those things, and it leaves kind of what ifs and missed opportunities and certain things like that, because I was actually part of a program where I could have earned a scholarship through like math and stuff like that. But because of just, I guess it was a lot of pressure too at the same time, like I didn't want to meet up to it, and you kind of worry about your comfortability and where you might go. But I used to do a lot of things that would have opened up my ability to maybe go to some better schools later on after high school. I was playing saxophone and marching band. I had really decent grades, mostly A's and B's, and things like that. And so now at this point, after getting my GED, kind of not paying attention, doing some of the more basic things, just carrying on regular 9-to-5 jobs, worked a couple of different places, food service, retail mostly. Now I'm currently working as like a small engine mechanic, but I still do work in a retail facility, so it's not 100% working on tools all the time and working on different equipment. So I do end up having to do things outside of what I did end up going to school for, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does, I'm more expected to go outside of the realm of what I went to school for on a majority of cases. So if I would have maybe picked something a little bit more specialized or something like that, or even work at a different place that maybe only caters to engine repair or working on cars and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure what the benefits are in those other fields. Some of them are strictly just your earning pay, and you got to figure out how you're going to retire and everything on your own. Which in some cases, if you're savvy with money, which unfortunately I wasn't for the most part, you can do really well for yourself. But it seemed like when I was going out of school, there was a lot of excuses I made for myself. I probably didn't apply to as many places or check back with the places that I did apply. I did have a few interviews, but for the most part, most of them said just because of the education and my lack of actual work experience, they didn't really want to hire me. I'm not 100% sure how accurate that was, but that was most of the vibe that I got, and during the interviews, that's what they were discussing with me. And for the most part, I've always wanted to be kind of an artist. I guess I never really wanted to see myself as like a cubicle kind of person or working in an office. I've always wanted to kind of have a free range in my work experience, and now I'm actually working in an office, even though it's a little bit larger, and I mean it's kind of a mechanic shop, but it is refined space. I'm not traveling at all. I'm pretty much stuck in that one location, which for some people is fine, but it does create less access, I guess, to new environments, and I guess you get a little bit bored quicker. So that does kind of cause a little bit of discomfort for me. It's not something that I enjoy every day on a regular basis. I could, go back to school, but I'll have to figure out how to finance that directly. So it would have been smarter for me to have paid more attention earlier in life and maybe got a little bit more funding to go to colleges. And if you have a more rounded education as far as making sure you're learning an instrument, maybe learning a second language on top of your basic education, such as like the sciences, math, of course, I'm drawing a blank here, but you got your earth sciences and your like anatomy was in high school, biology, certain things like that, and then you also have your I didn't pay attention in English whatsoever, and now that actually kind of causes an issue for me because it limits your vocabulary when you don't pay attention, especially to grammar and vocabulary classes. I use a lot of spell check when it comes down to spelling words. I do have to double check, make sure I'm putting periods and commas in places that I should be, which I probably still am missing it most of the time, just because I simply didn't find a reason to care about that class. I thought as long as I could talk to you and you could talk back to me, it didn't really matter how well I could speak. But it does cause issues with communication now because you do draw a blank on having to convey ideas and actually get things across to people without getting frustrated because you don't know exactly how to say it or what ways to word it. And then it does create situations where in my job, and especially being mixed race and being Mexican as well, I don't speak Spanish very well at all. If anything, like I took like 2 classes in high school and only went through one of them before dropping out. So it didn't really work out too well for me, and it actually creates a language barrier there where it creates a situation where it's difficult to speak to them as well. And with that situation, I used to actually just the reason for not learning it was just pretty much like, why should I? I don't feel that there was a need for it again. And now it actually creates a situation where I can't really help people who don't speak English as well because we can't communicate as well. We're pretty much pointing things out and trying to use the little words we do know in each other's languages. So if I was able to learn a second language, I could communicate better with more people. And just because of the area and location that I'm in, Spanish would be one of the better ones to learn. But you pretty much want to learn either whatever's in your area or what maybe is fun for you in some places you maybe want to go later in life. That's not really restrictive, but just having that ability does actually create a situation where you're more intelligent, you're able to communicate more things in multiple languages to different people. And then from what I understand, it makes it a little bit easier to continue learning new languages once you learn a second. And in some of those areas where I didn't necessarily care, I probably shouldn't have slacked off in them, and in fact done the exact opposite. And since I didn't care about them, maybe just went ahead and passed the classes by doing the work and just made it that much easier on the situation and showing people that it really wasn't that important. Really, I think what it was for the most part is I was just afraid of the difficulty in my ability to learn that because I excelled in places like science and math. And so it just made it easier to fluff that off and just make excuses for why I didn't want to do it. And then later on in life too, if you have a well-rounded education and you're paying more attention to your science, your history, your English, your art classes, make sure you are creative and have the ability to express yourself in multiple different ways so you don't become frustrated with not being able to. Maybe you want to just draw something that looks amazing and or have an image in your mind that you can't speak but you could draw. And so that creates even a third language situation that maybe you didn't think about, but you can draw pictures or paint, have a beautiful piece of music for somebody to listen to and express emotion, which maybe necessarily can't be discussed. So that's also a very good thing to learn. as soon as possible and as early as possible. I hope that most of you guys are young enough to have the ability to transfer these, because when you start getting into my age, pretty close to 30 here, you have to be more selective on what it is you spend your time on, because now I do spend, close to 9 hours at a job. There's travel time in between there. I have responsibilities making sure I have bills paid, which some you can do on the internet, which still takes a little bit of time to log in and pay, but isn't too restrictive. But then there's errands you do have to run, grocery shopping and things like that. You can find ways to make that more efficient. But when you're a child, you don't really have to worry about that. And then when you're a young adult, most of the time those things aren't as restrictive, because you have other people helping you. You may be living with somebody. You're not 100% responsible for yourself at this point. So you can spend more time learning the things that will make it easier for you to have a career or to own your own business and to advance your life, when you do have to be more responsible for yourself and others. And you want to have that ability, because you will feel better about yourself to be able to provide for people, to be able to educate other people on things that you've learned, to be able to pass on the knowledge. When you can't do that, you tend to feel like more of a victim, even though you're not. You have created the situation in your education, because there's ways to learn outside of just the regular school as well. Like, there's plenty of books you can learn from. You can learn from other people's mistakes and errors and what it was that made them successful in their life in any area. Writing fantasy books, writing books about relationships, self-improvement. There's plenty of books on how to use computers. I mean, anything you can think about, there's books on it. People on how they became actors and actresses. I mean, who knows what area you'd like to go in life. And I think for the most part, when you read books, most of them should be in some way educational, whether they're biographies or they're actual tutorial books in some way that are teaching you something, history books, things like this. Those are the most important. But fantasy books are also very important as well, because they do give you that ability to imagine things in your own mind. To be able to take pictures and concepts and create them in your own imagination, so that later on, if you want to use it, you've actually developed a very vivid and well built imagination, not just necessarily rigid scholarly education, because you need to be able to do a lot of things in order to feel comfortable in your own skin, and to be able to express yourself in a way that's constructive and people aren't going to find some fault in it that can be really torn down. Like, if you're aggressive just to get your point across and things like this, I've learned, unfortunately, that people don't pay attention to you when you want to just be shouting or barking orders and certain things like that. So when you don't have the way to convey it in whatever sense it is you feel you could speak the best, it does create that situation. So if you're able to go down some kind of really imaginative piece of artwork, is really what those books are as well. It will help you in that area. And then if you do want to do something in the more science areas, being able to kind of take a break from that area and find something that you can completely do unrelated to it might also be helpful in making that more productive, because when you have productive rests and relaxation areas, and you're not just completely frustrated or trying to vent situations, you actually can create a productive work environment as well, and be more ready for your work environment when you enjoy the way you relax. So finding those for yourself, it's difficult if you kind of shelter yourself or only pick a few aspects to go at, because you don't know what you want to do later on in life for the most part. You're going to be figuring that out, and it's constantly going to change. I mean, I've thought about quite a few things that I've wanted to do. I wanted to work on computers. Was playing saxophone for a while. I never really wanted to be, I guess, a professional marching band or whatever that would look like. But I did want to play. I was like in a ska band in high school and certain things like that. So it was kind of goofy just to mess around with it. It was like learning guitar. I never really learned, I guess, drawing or that kind of art, but I was taking art classes because they do kind of require them in high school. And that's one of the reasons they do require it, is because if you can be proficient in multiple different areas, it opens you up for opportunities in what you want to do later on in life, whether you want to be an artist or whether you want to be a teacher or you want to go be a great scientist and find some cure for some disease, something like this. You have no clue, and if you're dismissing school, dismissing your education, you're spending most of your time maybe chasing girls, doing drugs, partying, just kind of fluffing off life. It may be easier, and for some people that actually does work. Maybe just a real basic lifestyle is perfect for them. But I knew for me that wasn't one of those things I wanted. I kind of didn't really ever think of myself as just a real simple kind of person. There are more things that I think I chased after that made my life more complicated that I do try to remove to simplify my life. Like there's no reason to have like fancy, real expensive things. Name brand clothing, name brands on the name of the type of car you have, certain things like that. As long as it's in good working condition, it should actually be relatively cheap for you to operate. There should be no reason you're driving around trying to spend tons of money on things you can't spend or afford, or that are just frivolous and nonsense for the most part. So those things do waste your time when you're trying to chase those. And if you actually skip being able to provide for yourself, you're never going to be able to have any of that stuff you want in the first place. And so I've actually ran up a lot of debt just by kind of chasing entertainment and having fun. So now I'm cleaning that up, which has actually become difficult, and can actually take away from some of the fun you can enjoy in life. So because I wasn't paying attention, and I have a pretty regular job, and I don't spend money well, and I didn't really get a higher level of education. I have a technical degree, general education from a community college, and I don't have like a bachelor's or anything like that, which, you don't necessarily need. And if you run your own business or you find something that you enjoy to do, maybe you're in a nonprofit and you don't really worry about making a ton of money, you help people and that makes you satisfied and you're able to actually spend your money wisely. You still do want to have, in those areas, the ability to discuss with different types of people from different walks of life what they do and have some kind of relation with them. So, you do your best to try and be culturally diverse. And so that does help from an education, from reading, from learning from other people, from being in classroom settings with people with different opinions. That's what that is. It's just engaging with human beings, learning, and being in the process of life together. So really, it makes it kind of easy in life if you want to do something that there's a clear strategy to how to get there. Maybe it is a teacher and you know that there's specific goals. Maybe a specific type of area of teaching could be more difficult to get at than, let's say, just general education teaching. Maybe it's more specified and you have to take more classes to get there, like maybe teaching astronomy or something like that. I wasn't really sure. I'm not a person that went down that road. But for the most part, in the areas where maybe there isn't a clear road, it does make it more difficult. And I was actually listening to a talk for our YouTube video from Jordan Peterson, where he discussed like some of the people who want to be a little bit more artistic in life, that they should find something that's pretty much going to be able to fund their life, because art's one of those things, no matter what you're doing, musician, painter, photographer, where you may be able to work steadily for a short period of time. Even as a auto mechanic, I was told that there's going to be shifts in the times you make more money if you're on flat rate or piecework. That, certain periods people are fixing their car more, certain periods are spending more money on maybe gifts for people during Christmas time. So your income shifts, and if you don't have steady income or you don't know how to save properly for those times, it can become difficult. So I think he was making a very valid point in his discussion about that. And so for some of those areas, you do need to learn a skill, learn something that you can keep a relatively steady income, or create your own business. Even in that, sometimes you don't make an income for quite a long time. So if you're able to at least keep a decent paying job that you can live a life on, is really what we're all trying to figure out. And then we can figure out from there too, with if we're learning maybe agriculture or how to farm, we could provide for ourselves completely. So it does, having a well-rounded education, it just opens up your opportunities for anything and everything that you could possibly think of. And the more you learn, the more you pay attention, try to actually take it in and excel at any area, even the ones that you're forced to, just to maybe even prove a point to the people that put you in those situations, just that you can excel in everything. And then if there is an area that you find difficulty in, instead of just getting frustrated and dismissing it completely, maybe you should do your best to ask questions, try to spend more time in that area with people who know how to do it, and then just break through that wall, because that's usually what it is that your brain is trying to figure out how to take it in, process it, memorize it, and then be able to reteach it. So it's actually going through its own process in the way that it's creating its neurotransmitters and everything like that. So it's easier, from what I understand, and from personal experience, like as a child, it was probably easier to take in more things and more knowledge, just because you're more open to it. So you're able to do it easier at those ages. So when you get to more my age, it becomes more difficult, and actually it taxes you physically and mentally to try to learn new things. It becomes really frustrating. You become more fatigued faster. You can become more brain fog just from trying to learn a new task, especially if it's something that you did dismiss beforehand, and now because you're not in the setting to ask the same people those questions, it becomes more difficult. So for my suggestion would really just be, the younger you are, try to learn everything that you can, and the older you are, try to find ways to get people to help you learn. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. And at all times, you should be willing to learn really anything. Just because of the knowledge, you never know where it'll apply, or who you could teach, or who's going to ask you something later on that it may be related to. So I hope this discussion was helpful for you guys. And I hope to see you guys soon, and join me this Wednesday for our Bible study. All right. Have a good day.